The city of Atlanta was alive that Saturday afternoon. Music floated from street performers on the corners. The smell of roasted peanuts and hot dogs filled the air, and people of every background crossed paths downtown. Among them was Aaliyah Monroe, a striking black woman in her late 20s who carried herself with a quiet confidence. She wasn't just beautiful, she was intelligent, resilient, and strong. That morning, she had spoken at a women's empowerment seminar, addressing a packed hall about leadership, dignity, and courage. Her words had inspired dozens of young women to believe in themselves. For Aaliyah, that was her mission, to remind others of their worth. But the irony of life was cruel. Little did she know that before the day ended, she would need every ounce. Of the courage she preached, feeling drained but satisfied after her talk, Aaliyah stopped by a bustling café downtown. She wanted nothing more than a refreshing iced coffee and a quiet corner to rest. The line stretched halfway to the door, but she didn't mind. She scrolled through her phone, answered a few messages from friends congratulating her on the seminar, and smiled. Behind her, a man stepped in. He was hard to miss. Greg Walters, a white man in his mid-40s, stood with a permanent scowl etched into his weathered face. His body language screamed arrogance, chest puffed out, jaw clenched, eyes darting with hostility at everyone around him. Greg had lived his whole life believing he was superior to others. A bad divorce, a lost job, and years of bitterness had only hardened his racist views. As the line inched forward, Greg grew impatient. He grumbled under his breath, but then his eyes landed on Aaliyah. Something about her confidence, her poise, irritated him beyond reason. Greg snapping, "Hey, move it, girl. I don't have all day." The cafe grew quiet. Aaliyah slowly turned to face him, her brows raised. Aaliyah calmly, "Excuse me?" Greg louder, sneering. "You heard me. People like you should know better than to stand in the way." The words dripped with venom. A couple at a nearby table exchanged worried looks, but no one said anything. Aaliyah, however, wasn't the type to shrink. She locked eyes with him, her voice steady. "Aaliyah, there's a line, and you'll wait just like everyone else." Her tone was firm but polite. To anyone else, it would have been a fair response. But to Greg, being corrected by a black woman felt like an attack on his pride. His face darkened, his voice rising. "Greg, don't talk back to me. You think you're equal to me? You're not." Gasps rippled through the cafe. A young woman instinctively pulled out her phone and began recording. Before Aaliyah could even process his words. Greg stepped forward and without warning slapped her across the face. The sound was sharp, brutal. Echoing through the cafe, Aaliyah stumbled slightly, her cheek burning. The room went completely silent. For a split second, time froze, everyone's eyes glued to the woman he had just struck. Greg smirked, convinced he had put her in her place. He expected her to cry, to shrink, to beg. That was how he had always maintained control, through intimidation and violence. But Aaliyah didn't cry. She didn't flinch again. She placed her coffee on the counter with deliberate calmness, straightened her blazer, and turned to face him. Her eyes blazed with a quiet fury. "Aaliyah, slow, steady. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The next moments happened faster than Greg could comprehend. Aaliyah's years of martial arts and self-defense training came to life. She had trained not only for herself, but also taught young women how to protect themselves against predators. With precision, she grabbed Greg's wrist mid-swing as he tried to strike again, twisted it sharply, and forced him down to his knees. Greg let out a howl of pain as his arrogance turned into shock. Greg yelling, "What the hell? Let go of me." What Aaliyah wasn't done. She shoved him backward, sending him stumbling into a chair, which collapsed under his weight. The cafe erupted into gasps and shouts. A man at the counter muttered, "Damn." She handled him like a pro. Greg scrambled up, his face red, his pride wounded. He pointed at her, shaking with rage. "Greg, you're going to jail. You can't lay a hand on me." Aaliyah stepping forward, unwavering. "No, you assaulted me. And now the whole world will see what you did." She gestured to the phones raised all around. Half the cafe was recording. Greg's eyes darted around nervously. For the first time, he realized he wasn't in control. Asterisk, the cafe manager, pale and trembling, spoke up. "Manager, sir, I've already called the police. You'd better sit down before you make things worse." Greg sputtered, trying to gather support, but the customer's glares pierced him. No one was on his side. Within minutes, 2 officers entered. Greg immediately rushed toward them. "Greg, officers, arrest her. She attacked me." The officers raised their brows, but before Greg could spin his story, multiple customers stepped forward. "Customer, no, officer. We have the whole thing on video." He slapped her first. Phones were thrust forward, screens replaying the slap, the insult, the attack. The officers took one look, exchanged glances, and turned toward Greg. "Officer, sir, you're under arrest for assault." Greg's jaw dropped. "Greg, what? No, this is insane." "I'm the victim here," officer firmly. "The evidence speaks for itself." They cuffed him as the crowd applauded. Greg shouted, cursed, and struggled, but it was useless. His arrogance was shattered. Asterisk, when Greg was led outside, humiliated and powerless, the cafe erupted into cheers. People gathered around Aaliyah, thanking her, admiring her strength. A young college student whispered with awe, "Student, you stood up for all of us." "That was incredible." Aaliyah, her cheek still red but her spirit unshaken, gave a small smile. "Aaliyah, no one has the right to put their hands on you ever. Remember that." The words struck deep. For many watching, it was more than just a fight. It was a symbol of resistance, of dignity, standing tall when others tried to bring you down. That evening, the video of the incident went viral. Millions watched as a black woman defended herself against a racist attacker. The comments flooded in messages of support, admiration, and outrage at Greg's behavior. By the next morning, Greg's face was plastered across the news. He was fired from his part-time security job, condemned publicly, and facing charges. Meanwhile, Aaliyah was hailed as a hero. Asterisk, sometimes courage is tested in the moments we least expect. Sometimes the fight for dignity happens not on a stage or in a speech, but in the quiet corners of everyday life. And when a racist white man struck a black woman that day thinking he could silence her, he learned the hard way that strength, dignity, and justice will always strike back harder.